Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. We appreciate the patience of those there in the audience while we finished up a meeting before this meeting with the Main Street property owners. So let's go ahead and get started. And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. On the agenda, we have Commissioner Hurst, who has been invited to give a legislative prayer thought, so I'll turn the time over to her.
Recently, we took our family up the mountain and drove along the Skyline Drive, and we stopped along the way and we looked down at our community, and I was reminded of what a beautiful community that we live in, and it was fun to try and figure out which roofs belong to which businesses, and it reminded me of this thought that I love. It says, the world changes when we change our perspective, and I thought that fitting tonight with our meeting that we had earlier with the business owners along Main Street, that it always helps to hear a different perspective and to take that into consideration in some of the decisions that we make on the Planning Commission, and I appreciate that from the public as well as my colleagues here on the rostrum. So anyway, with that, I'll give a word of prayer. Our dear kind Father in heaven, we're so grateful for this opportunity to meet together as a Planning Commission this night. Please bless us that we will have thy spirit upon us and that we'll be able to hear the things that people need to say to us and that we'll understand the message they're trying to convey and that we'll be able to make decisions that will help us to maintain the beautiful community in which we live. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you very much. Turning to the first item on our agenda, this is a matter that was previously tabled from our August 22nd meeting. We're being asked to consider a proposed zoning text amendment for CZC 12.54 signs to allow murals on buildings, and we'll turn the time over to staff.
All right, thank you, commissioners. So the applicant, Ms. Becca Clayson, correct, owns or works in this building on North Main Street, and it is this building right here. So it has this very long white wall against the side of it. Her business is a marketing and design firm, so she kind of wants to brighten up that space a little bit and put a mural on it, but murals kind of lie within this gray boundary in our code of a sign and graffiti. So it doesn't quite have an exact definition in our code. So for a wall sign, for example, if it were to be considered a wall sign, she could only take up 15% of that wall space. Obviously a mural is going to be a little bit bigger than that. And then the definition of graffiti is an unauthorized piece of art on a wall. So it's kind of an undefined definition in our code. And so she would like to open that up and allow murals on the side of buildings in this zone or throughout the city. So there are a lot of cities around Utah that do allow signs, or allow murals, excuse me. And those cities that do, like Salt Lake and Ogden and Provo and South Salt Lake, all come to mind as a very large mural presence within those cities. And a lot of those cities don't really regulate them within zoning at all. So, for example, South Salt Lake has a mural fest every year, and they're like getting really into the arts and murals on the side of their buildings. And those are commissioned by their Community Arts Council. So it's not a zoning regulation. It is commissioned through their Arts Council. So a lot of cities will kind of use these different avenues to regulate murals, or encourage murals or commission murals on the side of buildings where they want them, but it's not regulated through zoning. And then in other cities, it is considered a sign and it is regulated through zoning. So we're kind of at this point in that stage where it is considered a sign or graffiti, depending on how you interpret it. So the applicant has written some recommendations to allow murals within the community, and she put on her recommended definition and limitations within that, as 1 through 5 is listed there. The staff kind of broadened that up to not to those commercial buildings in the CM zone without a size restriction, and basically would go under a similar permit as a sign permit, but would be for that specific definition of a mural. And we came to this conclusion based on looking at other cities and based on how they regulated them. Some articles I was reading about South Salt Lake, it improved their businesses because it activates all those empty spaces and it allows for pedestrians to kind of like be curious about these buildings that they had never seen before. So if all of a sudden there's this building that you never really noticed and all of a sudden it has this really large, beautiful painting on the side of it, you're kind of curious about it and you go inside, and it has actually increased their business in South Salt Lake. And I thought that was a very interesting, like mutually beneficial relationship. And obviously we're talking about Main Street in the past few months, and we keep on bringing up these terms like revitalization and placemaking and is Main Street unique? And I think this would be a good opportunity to open up those types of property rights and make Main Street a more unique place, and activate those spaces that are kind of underutilized or could use some beautification or aesthetic improvement. I think this is, the applicant brings a compelling argument that it would help revitalize Main Street in a way that we are actively trying to do right now in the Planning Commission and the City Council. So I made 2 motions, one with the applicant's restrictions that she submitted to us, and then us opening up a little bit those murals. And I did keep it just within the commercial medium zone for right now on commercial buildings. Becca's building happens to be a historic local significant site that has already been painted over. I did write that we wouldn't want murals on National Register sites, but hers is a local significant site, and those buildings aren't too much of a concern to me because there are very few commercial buildings within these registers, so it's not a big concern for me. I think it would be a very rare situation to have historical buildings. This just happens to be one of the few commercial buildings, and it is already painted white. So I just left it for the national registers to have some restrictions on them. And it was interesting researching this because there is kind of a conflicting case law in terms of restrictions on zoning codes and First Amendment, and there's not a clear consensus in case law about murals and signage. So I think we have that a little bit of gray space to regulate them in some ways, but not in all the ways. So it's really important that it's a non-commercial message, and I think that does get a little sticky if there's going to be words on it. But things like logos or like sayings or mottos or something that would be advertising their business would have to be a sign. And it's important that we make that distinction between a commercial and a non-commercial sign, and that a mural is a piece of art and not advertising. So I think that that's really important to keep in mind when we're permitting these murals, that we will have to assess them on some level of the content to make sure that there's not a commercial message behind it, if that makes sense. So I'll leave you guys to discuss. Do you have any questions off the bat?
Yes, I have a couple of questions for you. So as I read the difference between the proposed language of the new zoning ordinance and your modified language, the two major changes that I see is that, one, you've removed the size restriction.
True.
And the second is that there is no longer a removal option for the community. And I will admit, when I read that, I was thinking, I don't know how you police that, but.
Yeah,
so
I just thought it was too subjective, and I don't find it necessary. Like, if the property owner wants to put a mural on their building, we shouldn't say, oh, we don't like it. I think it just gets too subjective, and should be administrative.
Sure.
And the same thing for the 50%. A mural, usually murals are meant to take up the whole wall, and I think that limiting that is silly.
I don't disagree with either of the changes you've made. I just wanted to make clear that those were two things that were intentional changes from the proposed language to your new revised language. Okay, now I have a couple of questions from a legal standpoint, and I'll ask either you or Lisa, since it sounds like you've researched this. With regards to art being a protected issue under the First Amendment, are we confident that do we feel good about the fact that we can regulate a mural in the first instance if a lot of cities have concluded that that's not something they can regulate?
Yeah, I think that art is protected speech under the First Amendment, but just in my brief research, it's very difficult to regulate either way. I mean, if it's difficult to draft a regulation that meets the constitutional requirements, that it's not unconstitutionally vague, and that it's not content-based. But our existing sign ordinance already has those flaws in it. So this is sort of a compromise of saying we'd rather regulate than not regulate at all. So that's the attempt.
Okay. So here's my second question then with regards to language, because I think that me personally, I'm going to err on the side of First Amendment speech rights to, regulation. But in the proposed language that you have included here, Cassie, the mural shall contain no commercial message. And to me, that can be a really ambiguous term. So for instance, if I have a hardware store and I put up a mural on the side of my building that has hammers and saws and photos of the things that I am including in my business, is that a commercial message or is that art?
Pandora's box.
Right? If I have a pool hall, right? The example that we were talking about earlier, and I put billiards up on the side, is it permitted or not permitted under that language?
Yeah, it's, again, I think Lisa weighs in that it's difficult to regulate. I know that there is some case law that looked at WAG, the dog walking business. It's kind of the Uber of walking your pets. And there was a mural case where they just simply put up a picture of a bunch of dogs in a dog park, given that plug. But they also used the trademark shape of the dog for WAG. And that was ruled that the way that ordinance was set up, that was commercial speech and the rest of the dogs were not. So, this is a really difficult place to decide how we hang in, and I think this is something that the commission and the council have to weigh in its entirety. Do we want to allow these opportunities and understand all of these difficult parameters that are shaped around it? Or do we want to simply just say, this is too much to handle and we're just simply not going to allow it? Now, the reason staff did not choose that direction, given all of the concerns, is that if somebody painted today on the wall, it's an unauthorized painting, so it becomes graffiti. So now how do you address murals that are labeled as graffiti? And so there's really no clean answer here, because if we just simply say no to them, they become graffiti. The other extreme is here's your box, regulate the size, and you just do whatever you want in that box, which is really no different than a wall sign. So do we now change the wall sign percentages and replace that with the painted sign percentages? Do we double up on that and one sign can be bigger than the other under art versus business sign? It's Pandora's box, again.
Is there some established case law that an owner who is looking to paint a mural on their building could go to find some insight into what constitutes a commercial message? Is that something that is settled in the case law?
I don't perceive it settled in what I did in the preliminary research, but again, I'm not skilled like Lisa to go through and discover all the case law and try to render an opinion.
And I haven't actually done the research, so if you'd like me to, I can, but I have not.
Cassie, as you've drafted this language, what would constitute a commercial message that wasn't a logo, a trademark, or a company slogan?
Those were the things that were coming up in the previous examples, like the dog thing, like dogs, are they a commercial message for your dog walking thing? But because it had the logo in it, it was deemed a commercial message.
And I guess my question is, if we were to strike no commercial message and just say that murals shall contain no logos, trademarks, or company slogans or obscene messages, does that cover what we're concerned about? And does by doing that strip out the ambiguity that might create some tension down the road?
I think so. I think that's something to consider.
All right. And as you did your research, is there established case law on what constitutes an obscene message or image?
There is under Utah law. So if you think of your billboards and what you can post under the Billboard Act of Utah law, there is a regulation when something crosses to an obscene level.
And the First Amendment does not protect obscene language or.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and my concern in looking at the specific language is always to make clear to a property owner as they're approaching this regulation so that there's not ambiguity in terms of what is allowed or isn't allowed, right? If I'm going to recommend an ordinance, I want to make sure that it's clear to everybody on its face.
Yeah, declaring obscene is written. I'd prefer not repeating the language.
Yeah.
What constitutes that, but yeah, it's defined.
All right, thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions for staff?
I do. So let's, real quickly, I want to talk, maybe go back to the commercial medium. I'm looking at motion option 2, which I think is, I'm generally in favor of that, but maybe we, refine that a little bit. So limiting this to commercial medium, can you talk a little bit about the thought behind limiting it to commercial medium and not just saying all commercial or all non-residential areas or something like that?
Basically, we wanted to start small, and because of the applicant's zone of where their building is located, we thought this was really the best zone for this because of our small local businesses in this area. And if you open it up to all commercial zones, do we want the side of Target having a huge mural? Maybe we do, but I think this is the best baby step place to start for something like this.
So then, I mean, I guess if we were to revisit it, we could revisit it at a later time. But going back to the conversation you had about not painting on buildings that are on the National Register of Historic Places, my initial thought was, well, unless it's already been painted, right? Then we can do that. So maybe, I mean, my thought was to add that into item number 4, unless it's already been painted. But along those same lines, let's say somebody has a beautiful brick building, it's not been painted, they decide they want to put a mural on it, they just paint it, right? And then they're already in, aren't they? Or what's to stop them from just painting it?
Yeah, well, the issue with painting on a historic fabric, I don't know, Cassie, you want that? The issue of painting on a historic fabric is that is part of the Interior Secretary's review, is what is damaging and not damaging to the material uses on the historic building. And painting on a brick is considered a damaging action and it has the penalty of removal from the National Historic Register of Places. So the issue would be is that somebody goes and just does it, paints it, they're at risk of being pulled off the National Register and the incentives that are associated with that, and then it falls default back to probably it's been painted and here we're at.
All right, so that's good to understand. If it's already been painted at the time they apply to get on the National Register, then that's something else.
Right.
They'd be,
Yeah, because they're going to weigh how much damage has been done to the building. If it's small amount, it doesn't make it not eligible, but they wouldn't want to increase the damage to any historic structure.
okay. Yeah, I think for me at least, I'd still like to propose, and we can talk about this later when we get to a motion or whatever, but on that item number 4, adding unless that building has already been painted, just to, and if, you know, Cassie, you bring up a point that in this resident or commercial medium zone, there really isn't anything, right? But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the one that I'm thinking of in this zone that would fit this description is Ron Randall's gas station is in this zone on the National Register. If he
But
got
it does have a
inspired.
painted pattern.
Yeah, that is
that's
already
typical
painted
to-
and has been repainted many times. And if he wanted to, I guess you could argue that.
Good. So last question I have, and this is kind of, so how does this is maybe for our education a little bit, how do murals apply to residential zones? If somebody has a side of their garage that's cinder blocks or something like that, if they wanted to paint a mural on the side of their garage, how is that handled?
If you wanted to paint your home to look like a hamburger, you could, because we have no regulations on the exterior use of materials in residential areas.
Residential zones.
And actually, there's a really great story recently in Florida. Someone painted their whole house to be Van Gogh's Picasso, or Van Gogh's Starry Night, sorry. And it was upheld by the First Amendment, so.
But I assume though that obscenity still applies to stuff like that, or not?
If you have residential design standards, then the percentage would apply. Centerville does not have residential design standards, so you can, as long as you meet the building code, you can put whatever exterior you want.
You would have some very unhappy neighbors.
You could have your obscene hamburger if you wanted.
There you go.
Got
Well,
it.
obscenity, we can go, yeah, obscene hamburger, but
Okay.
the triple hamburger is where you obscene status reached.
Thank you, Corey.
Any other questions for staff? Hamburgers notwithstanding. All right, let's go ahead and take the opportunity to invite the applicant to step forward and speak to this matter. Yeah, go ahead and stand right up at one of the podiums. Yep, speak into the mic for those at home for their viewing pleasure. Just introduce yourself.
My name is Becca Clayson, and I work at the corner of 12 North Main Street.
Ms. Clayson, how do you feel about the revised language that staff has proposed for the ordinance? Does that cause you any concern?
No, I'm totally fine with it. I had a few of those, like the size restriction and the other one that you were asking Cassie about. I had added those in just because I thought that having a few more restrictions might make it a little bit more of a baby step to try to get it passed. But I'm fine with having those changes made to it.
Out of curiosity, you don't have to answer this or know this yet, but I'm curious, do you know what type of a design that you want to put up on your building?
So there's a local lettering artist named Jill DeHaan. She lives in Bountiful, and she creates really beautiful like floral and that sort of like painting work, and a lot of beautiful like lettering as well. So I don't know the exact message or like copy that I would want for the design yet, but I would imagine like a mix of like an inspirational message that's maybe like a few words long and is a mix of like that lettering with some other like floral or leaf type of like artwork, and something that would just make someone stop and look at it, maybe take a picture in front of it, something that would bring a smile to someone's face.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Doesn't look like there are any. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
These are some of the examples from that artist she was just
Yeah.
talking about in particular.
They looked very cool from reviewing the packet. So I'm excited about it personally. I think it'll add a lot of character to Main Street. This matter has been scheduled as a public hearing, so we'll go ahead and take the opportunity to open this matter for a public hearing, and if any member of the public wants to step forward and speak, we'll invite you to do so now. Seeing no one step forward, we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion or debate? If not, I am going to make a motion to recommend the zone text amendment with the amended language proposed by staff with the following additional amendments. I would strike from number 3 section, so this is the, at where it says add subsection M, and then the points underneath that. I would strike murals shall contain no commercial message, including. And I would move that up to point number 1 after any and delete commercial message. So here is how it would read. So number 1 would read, a mural is recognized as a one-of-a-kind, hand-painted, hand-tiled, or digitally printed image on the exterior wall of a building that does not contain any logos, trademarks, or company slogans, or any obscene message or images, period. Number 2 would read, just like it's drafted, and then number 3 would be eliminated entirely.
And then
With number 4, the revision would be murals may not be painted on buildings that are on the National Register of Historic Places, comma, unless such buildings are already painted, period.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? All right, we'll go ahead and take a roll call vote. Commissioner Helgeson?
Aye.
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 All right, for the benefit of the public, what this means is that we are going to propose to the city council that they adopt the regulation as we have amended it. So this will now go up to the city council, and they'll be the ones to make the ultimate decision as to whether this new zoning code goes into effect or not. So thank you so much.
Chair Heyman, may I address the applicant?
Yes.
Since you're foraying into this the first time, you can contact the city recorder, Mackenzie, and she'll be able to report to you on what council agenda this item will be scheduled for.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Chip.
I'm going to take a brief segue. It looks like we have some Boy Scouts in the audience, I'm guessing. Yes, what troop are you guys from? 1338. We'd like to take the opportunity to recognize Troop 1338 here, learning about our civic form of government. Welcome. All right, moving to the next item on the agenda, number 2. We have a public hearing. It's a request for a fence height increase for Renegade Sports at 240 South Frontage Road. We'll turn the time over to staff.
All right, thank you. All right, so last month, Renegade Sports had an administrative approval of an expansion of their site, which included an additional use of vehicle and equipment rental. And by expanding this use, they're going to be putting a lot of storage equipment and rental vehicles and equipment out on the back of their site. So this was all approved by Corey last month. And because it was all administrative and you guys luckily weren't needed in any way, but they do need a higher fence because the grading, as you can see in this picture, is quite different on the property lines. So the fence, even though it is only a 6-foot high fence from where it starts out of the ground, we take the average grade in considering that height, so it goes as high as 10 feet. In some places, and only you can approve that height increase with your findings. So that's what you're needed here for today. So this is I'm sorry, this is not in color, but this is their proposed fence, and as you can see, the very different grade changes around the property line, and this would be for screening purposes of their equipment and their vehicles that they will be now storing back there. So this is right in like the Kohl's Target area parking lot. So a lot of people are driving by it and through it a lot, but there aren't really buildings like right next to this area exactly. So to keep that in mind, it's just a screening aesthetic purpose for this site. So pretty simple. if you guys have any questions.
Any questions for staff? I'm getting so excited I'm breaking my mic tonight. All right. We'll go ahead and take, if there's no questions, we'll take the opportunity to invite the applicant to step forward and speak to the matter if you'd like to do so. Is that? No? You don't have to if you don't want to. So, all right. Applicant declines to speak with us, but that is perfectly fine. Any further discussion or debate? Oh, wait, is this matter scheduled for, yeah, sorry, I have to do this. Not that I think anybody's going to step forward, but we'll go ahead and take this opportunity to, it's true, I never know. We'll take this opportunity to open this matter for a public hearing if anyone would like to speak to the matter. Seeing no one step forward, we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion or debate? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve the increased height of the fence for Renegade Rentals at 240 Frontage Road, which shall not exceed maximum height of 10 feet, with findings A and B. I think that's it. Okay.
I'll second.
I have
It's been moved and seconded.
three small grammatical changes to our motion. Maximum height does not say maximum height, it says maximu.
My spell check has been really funky lately,
It's
I
been good.
apologize.
And then, under finding B, the planning commission finds that the property location is in an intensive commercial use area. So move is over to, after location. That way, we look like we're slightly educated.
Yes, those changes seem to be very appropriate.
All right.
I know they were just typos, it just happens.
Yeah. Okay. Any further discussion or debate? And we'll start with Commissioner Hurst.
Aye.
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 All right, that has been approved. And since that's an administrative decision, the buck stops here. So congratulations, you are now able to build your fence height.
Put up some fences.
So, I guess my one question is, so before we had to approve, do I have
Do you,
to purchase a permit?
actually, why don't you're welcome to talk to Corey.
Okay.
He can answer any questions that you have regarding the specifics.
Yeah, once you exceed 7 feet in height, the building official needs to approve the fence. So you can pick up the building permit online or at our office, and we have the plans. So if you just submit that with the information on it, we'll attach the plans to that and submit it to the building official.
Thank you so much. Matter 3, next up on the agenda, the Planning Commission is going to be considering a proposed conceptual subdivision for 5 commercial lots at 1243 North, 1300 West within the Shorelands Commercial Park. So we'll turn the time over to staff.
Thank you. Our applicant, Mr. Jeff Cook, as you said, would like to subdivide his property at 1275 North, 1300 West. So not, if any of you know Salmon's, the Pastures office site right to the west of that. It is currently just 4 acres of open land, and it does have this small little piece of property that's not included, which is just kind of an awkward thing that should be maybe included into the property, but will not be. So, and it is zoned differently, so that's going to constrict that property. You know, it's pretty small, but, you know, developing this will obviously impact the way that that goes in any direction. So, currently, Jeff Cook would like to subdivide this for office and warehouse use. Warehouse is a conditional use permit in the Shorelands. Office is permitted, and he would like to have other, you know, storage sheds and stuff like that once he gets those tenants and sells his property as he wishes. The subdivision is 3 lots on 1275 North, and then actually 4, sorry, and then the 5th on 1300 West, and it has this private drive going through and connecting all 5 of them. The problem with lot 5 currently is that it does not have quite enough frontage. It is required to have 50 50 feet and doesn't quite make it. And there's also this very large communication easement running 50 feet through it as well. So it very much restricts what that frontage property can do for, it's going to be a lot at the back and kind of restrict the use and access of that development as a whole. And so we do have like some pretty big concerns about the way that these lots are laying out because of that fifth piece is pretty awkward and just kind of restricts the way that you can use it, that it's really hiding tucked back here without any frontage that's usable, because all of this is a easement and it's very flag shaped even though it's not a flag lot. So I think that Jeff has had many conversations with Corey over the past few months of what he wants to do and his vision with this property. And we think that with some adjustments, there's certainly a lot of potential that can go into these 4 acres. But some changes do need to be made specifically so we can really utilize Lot 5 the most. And that could take some reconfiguration based on the frontage and the easement issues that we have right now. Just so you guys know, in the future, this is in the Shorelands Commerce Park, so there's going to be all kinds of a little bit higher architectural standards and a cohesive architectural theme to all these buildings. So we do want to lay it out so those can all work really nicely together in the future once they're sold off. And just this frontage on Lot 5 and Lot 3 that are kind of like tucked behind these other buildings may not be contributing to the look of those frontages in the way that we would ideally imagine. So obviously it's a great piece of property and 5 lots is certainly doable, but there is going to be some changes that come down the road. So, but from a conceptual level, you know, it almost meets muster. There are just a few zoning changes that still need to be dealt with. So.
Thank you very much, Cassie. Any questions for staff? If not, we'll invite the applicant to step forward and speak to this matter. Go ahead and please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jeff Cook. Actually, the Smiths own this property. I'm working with them on the property. We have Gordon, Gary, and Sharon. Hi. Sorry about that. Anyway, they're here as well tonight. So, a couple of things. I'm going to go over to the other side.
There's a pointer there you can use too if you.
Is there?
Yeah,
If
right.
you're so inclined, yep, there you go.
Let me just, something like that. Okay, so, first of all, this Lot 5, they're talking about, the way that our engineer drew it, it's like 47 feet or something. It was just drawn incorrectly. There's plenty of room for our 50 feet there. So we will have enough. It's a correction, like Cassie was saying, but we know that, and we talked to Corey about it, and it was more like, yeah, this is conceptual. But the thing that we're doing here is we're going to have some private easements, access points coming through here like this and this and this that benefit all of these properties, give them really nice, access to the backs of their buildings and things like that. This building fronts, or this lot, fronts 1300 West. Both these 2 lots front 1275 North. Lot 5 has 50 feet of frontage here. And I don't know what you were talking about on Lot 3. We have plenty of frontage. We face 1300 West, so I didn't understand what you were saying.
From a zoning standpoint, yeah, you do.
From a zoning standpoint, what other standpoint don't we? I mean, it's a nice lot. It's 100 some odd feet wide. I don't understand the comment there.
Yeah, go ahead and
Okay.
answer that one.
We're just worried that we're not utilizing the frontage appropriately if you're tucking those buildings too far back, like specifically more on Lot 5, if there would be any reason to reconfigure.
So you're talking more about Lot 5, not necessarily Lot 3.
Yeah, if those could be rearranged in any way and therefore affecting Lot 3.
Yeah, I think the only, I mean, at least the thing that we would look at, it's nicer, this has access, a through access, private access through here, and has frontage there. We'd rather that this were another independent lot, but if we had to do something, then we'd have to do some kind of configuration between, maybe take Lot 3 back further, or extend Lot 4 out, or something like that, I don't know. But we'd prefer that it stays the way we've drawn it. The other thing, you mentioned this little corner here, a little bit of ambiguity there, I think. We don't own that corner. It's not that we own it and we're not including it. We don't own that corner. That is owned by the person that owns all the property across the street. We've tried to buy it from him, but he's not interested in selling. So we have no control over that. It's not our property. So that's kind of where, I think that explains what I wanted to try to explain anyway. And do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I have a question for you. So the drive that you're talking about through there,
Yeah.
when you're all done, is that going to be open to the public, or is that going to be behind a gate?
It's private. We'll probably have gates for security at these locations, and it'll be private. I mean, obviously, people that are coming to see the businesses, they'll be open in the day, but it's not going to be a road where people are going to come down here and drive through here to get over to there. And this road ends right here. It doesn't go any further. This lot comes back like this because there are big natural gas easements running through from about here to here. So our parking has to be, kind of in that area, because we can't build out there because of those lines. We can have parking, but we can't build over top of them. But anyway, yeah, these would be private, and they would be open during business hours for.
So I guess part of the reason why I asked that is that once it's all done, would the public know any different that there's only 50 feet of frontage on the one end of Lot 5? Or
they won't know any of that. They won't know where the property lines are.
Yeah, okay.
It's just, one of the reasons we liked it is the whole thing still remains, visually, it just remains open.
Staff had recommended two things with regard to this. One is that Lot 5 be adjusted to meet that 50-foot frontage requirement.
Right.
It sounds to me like that's something that you've already addressed.
Yeah.
Do you have any concerns with regard to the second piece of this, that they also want you to meet the expected right angles to the street, which the lot face, and eliminate unneedful jogging of side lot lines?
Yeah, Corey's mentioned that. I don't know if Corey's here. And I mean, we are at a right angle to this property here, but our property line on this end runs at an angle. No matter what we do, even if we added this to this lot, we still don't have a right angle there. Nothing we do will change that right angle, or that not being a right angle, sorry. No matter what we do, there's gonna be an angle there. It's not much of one, but all of these are straight parallel to the road. Here, 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 there. Everything is perpendicular to the road at right angles. The only thing that's not is this, and no matter what you do or don't do with Lot 5, that doesn't change.
Cassie, can I invite you to speak to that requirement? Or Corey, one of the two of you.
Yeah, so typically we like our subdivisions to be more cookie cutter and go away from these flag-shaped lots, even though they're not flag lots.
They're not flag lots.
Yeah, they're not flag lots. And the Planning Commission can approve different shaped pieces in a subdivision with good cause. So that is up to you to determine if it's a good cause.
Yeah, the right angle we're talking about is, you see all of these are the cookie cutter shape. This is the non-cookie cutter shape. So you have a long distance to jog, and then the other part of the side lot line. And if you just think about it, when you start measuring, in general theory, if you start measuring setbacks, which line is it that I'm measuring off of? Because you've got these jogs. If I tuck in a building behind, is that an 8-foot setback? Is that a front yard setback? You get into kind of those generalized questions. So the subdivision ordinance is just saying, we really want these straight, square, box, rectangle type layouts for efficiency of use. That's what the subdivision ordinance says. But it says also in there that there are circumstances that that's not the case. And so what we're raising in the staff report is this is a large tract of land. And I know what Jeff, the applicant's looking at, and it's not his intent of his configuration that creates out of whack. But in a subdivision, we don't know and can't anticipate, even though I know Jeff anticipates what he's going to do with the property. We don't look at it from a planning standpoint. We look at this, these will be lot transfers into the future. And does this configuration of a 50-foot stem, even though it's not a flag lot, it's still a stem, is that the best configuration for the future use of that lot? And that's really all that, you're coming into play. You have a pipeline easement through there that encumbers a lot of the area. So structures, it could be argued that structures are not going to be placed in that front piece anyway. But does it become such a long stem and so underutilized in its configuration where if you redrew the lines, which you could because it's just vacant ground, and created a larger area that functions with a building out front and buildings into the back rather than just a stem that's encumbered by the pipeline easement. And I think that's the value judgment you have to make and so we just wanted to call out the black and white of the ordinance so that everybody understood that, so that you went in eyes wide open to that configuration potentially has some constraints to it.
If we approve this as staff has drafted it in the staff report, requiring them to meet the expected right angles, and they come back to us in the final site plan and lay it all out and say, look, this is the best we could do because of the gas easements and whatever, at that point, we could then still opt to allow this flag-ish piece, correct?
Well, that's the chicken and egg question. We've had this discussion about developing first, and coming back in with subdivision later, and it all concluded that the best step is create lots because all of the development's not going to come online at a time. So once you plat it, that will be the shape unless the plat's amended. And so the question is are you comfortable with this shape, because this will be the outcome and the configuration for that lot without an adjustment to the plat perpetually.
Can I ask a question? Maybe it'd be easier. Can I come around? I'm going to come around real quick. Sorry.
Official pointer works better than a laser because it gets absorbed.
So talk to me about, obviously this easement here creates some challenges. Talk to me about the potential of moving this access here over to here and then creating two square-ish lots like this.
Yeah, that's not a design that won't work very well. It would take out too much of both of these buildings because this isn't buildable. So our access around needs to be where these easements are. So these are designed so that our accesses are across the east or over top of the easements. So if you were to bring an access in here, for example, all that would do is narrow that building up.
Gotcha. Thanks.
The other thing I was going to say is, like, I don't know, if you look at Salmon's buildings just east of there, they didn't subdivide, right, Corey? They just went in and built all the buildings on the lot. And there's buildings back in behind, buildings to the side. The only difference with this is an actual lot, but visually it's no different than what we have here. There's lots of buildings that are back in behind everything, and I don't see that there's a difference. But it helps us use our property better, and I'm hoping the city will think, yeah, it'd be nice to maybe help property owners use their property better.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I just wanted to ask Gary, Gordon, any of you guys want to say anything? Okay. Sharon, sorry.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
This matter has been scheduled for a public hearing, so we'll take the opportunity to open the public hearing and invite any member of the public who wishes to speak to this matter to step forward. Seeing no one step forward, we'll close the public hearing. Any further discussion or debate? How are we feeling about this flag lot property? Even though I know it's not flag lot, but
Landlocked and flag lots, let's eliminate those.
The flag lot-ish property,
this
right?
oddly shaped
The
property.
STEM property.
STEM is a good word.
I think that because of some very significant easements that run through there, you're kind of constrained on what you can do. And, you know, every once in a while we have situations that come up with code for, there are exceptions that can be made. And usually one of the main exceptions is there's no other way to do it. And I'm kind of inclined to think that this is one of those situations where I don't know if there's another way to really do it. If you were, you know, if you only had one of these easements running through here, it would make it a lot easier. That'd simplify a lot of stuff, but you got two of them.
That was my concern as well with regard to that easement. And also if they put this sort of frontage road through, it's not going to feel like a STEM lot.
Right, and that's why that was where I was going with my question is once it's all done, is it going to feel like it's a STEM, or is it just going to feel like it's another kind of a thing, you know? Anyway, yeah.
Can I ask Jeff, what is the size of lot 5? Oh, it's about an acre, right? 41,000 square feet, so almost an acre. So it's a big chunk of property to not, you know, for them to not be able to develop. And I agree, I just don't see another way with where the easements are sitting. In fact, is it the biggest lot? Yeah, it's the biggest lot.
Well,
But I don't love that it's a STEM. But it's a big chunk of property to.
Commissioner Helgeson, you want to weigh in on this one?
I feel the same way, but I assume it has all the width required, like for fire emergency vehicles and all of that on the development.
Well, would it need to or wouldn't need to, would it? These are private roads, or would it need to?
Would need
I
to
was
get
gonna say it's meeting
access.
the.
In the future,
code.
because of the depth of the properties, you're going to see during site plan processes, additional hydrants placed. And so there will be some fire access issues during a site plan review, but it's not necessary right now for a subdivision.
I'm going to make a motion just to get it out on the table for the Planning Commission to accept the conceptual subdivision for Legacy Lands at 1243 North, 1300 West with directives 1 through 3 in the staff report, except I would strike in number 2, but to meet the expected right angles to the street which the lots face and eliminate unneedful jogging of side lot lines. So the only restriction in number 2 would be to meet the minimum 50 feet frontage requirement for findings A through C in the staff report, except, yes, I caught that typo in C. There, we need to take out the word "the" before chapter. There's a "the" comma.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate?
Just for clarification for the actual motion, so item 2 will read lot 5 is to be adjusted to meet, and then taking out also not only the lot 5 is to be adjusted to meet the minimum lot frontage requirements of 50 feet, period.
I struggle with this one. I'm sort of on the fence, but I think I'm ultimately okay with it in STEM shape, just given the nature of the property. So, all right, let's go ahead and put it up for a vote. Commissioner Helgeson?
Aye.
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 All right, the motion passes. And because that's an administrative matter, now the applicant will move forward. That one does not need to go to the city council. And we'll go ahead and move on to the next item on our agenda. Number 4, we're being asked to consider the proposed final site plan for Legacy Commons PDO, which is a mixed-use development project on the northwest corner of 1250 West and Parish Lane. We'll turn the time over to staff.
Chair Heyman, I'm just, do not see the presence of the applicant here at this time. We can move forward. It's scheduled tentatively 8:10, although not required to meet that. That's just a guiding time frame.
I
Certainly can begin or see what happens.
Why don't we go ahead, because, yeah, let's just, I'm going to just postpone it now. We'll skip
Okay.
to the next item on the agenda, since I do see the applicant here. So we'll just switch the order of those. So we'll put on hold item number 4, and we'll move straight to item number 5. I can't believe we're actually ahead of time. I would have never predicted
Don't jinx
this.
it. Don't jinx it.
Knock on wood, knock on
Don't.
wood.
Yeah, don't curse us.
Okay, so next item on the agenda, we're being asked to consider the proposed final site plan for the South Davis Metro Fire Station at 300 South Main Street. And I'll turn the time back over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Heyman. Members of the commission, as indicated, this is for the fire station, the Centerville, I think it's Station 83 is the actual number of the station. Yeah, you saw this a few weeks ago in a couple of fashions. One, the conceptual site plan, and then to the matter of the amendments. Just reporting, the City Council did adopt amendments that were recommended up to them, and so we took the conceptual site plan matters as well as the recognizing amendments and provided a report to you. There's two general factors that general items that you're looking at tonight. One is obviously the final site plan, which they would, if approved, could move on to the next steps for the constructing of the station. But they're also addressing the matter of the parking associated with it, and through various channels of talking about how to broach the parking issue, it all ended up coming to you in the format that you see in the staff report, as well as the letter requested to you in the attachments. The first thing I will address simply is just the final site plan. We generally found that the final site plan is substantially compliant with the expected amendments and the conceptual approval. I provide to you the kind of the stoplight version, the greens and the yellow cautions and so forth in the report. We did not find anything that did not comply with that previous approval and the amendments. We did bring up a cautionary note in the staff report talking about the plaza. And just for clarity, I'm trying to separate out in the presentation, there is the plaza that is being built that allows the building to be set back further, so a further distance, and that's the apparatus bay area and the design elements associated with that. That's one type of plaza. There is some change from the conceptual site plan to going from the checkerboard colored pattern concrete, and you'll see that they have now used score marks and different sizes of those score marks and created a pathway to the doorways connecting the public sidewalks. And so they're replacing the colored pattern that you saw at the conceptual level with the differing score marks and pattern design changes to the use of the concrete. I don't think that's a significant matter to say it doesn't substantially comply with the conceptual approval, but you still have to make the value judgment. Did that meet the intent of getting the increased setback allowance for the apparatus bay? The second plaza is more of what was not really reviewed thoroughly in the conceptual, because it was brought up during the conceptual and they were given guidance to address it. The second plaza is on the south side of the building. What the code is trying to say is that they're adjoining properties. If there's more than 15 feet between the adjoining properties, space to the built environment, then you need to provide a different type of feature. It's like a plaza. It's called a gathering space. And so the best way to explain it is if you go to Park City, walk their Main Street, you will see gaps in the building fabric. And when you see those gaps, you'll see little kiosk places, some planters, some public places to sit, and then it moves on down the road as you walk down the environment. And that's what the form-based code is trying to accomplish there. And that, we had a discussion when they had the accessory building in the area. What did it mean? There was discussions about the gathering area. What did that constitute? Was there risk associations with that? The fire department did express at the time that would be a risk, and they had raised some concerns about that. Ultimately, the discussion that ensued is maybe we'll take the outbuilding and move it to the back. And the discussion is using some type of historic marker is a part of that area. So as they've come back with their plans, you're seeing extension now of the apparatus, not the apparatus bay itself, but the design of the apparatus bay is extending from its limits on the conceptual plan further to the south to manage this gathering space area. So they're including part of the concrete decorative work into that gathering space, and they've provided a placeholder for a future historic sign if that works out with the Landmarks Commission in the city to install a kiosk in that place. And so that's what they've changed on their site plan is extending that pattern concrete to create that gathering space with a historic sign. And you need to weigh in if that makes up sufficient of the 15 feet. So there's like 32 feet, so we need to make up 15 or so feet in that gap. Now, part of that gap is once you go behind the sign, they've created a larger detention basin for their site than you originally saw, and it'll increase the ability to handle the on-site drainage and lessen, I think, a little bit on the north side of the property that they're planning to handle some drainage, and they can talk about the particulars of that. But no, behind the sign, there's an extension of the landscaping area involved in that detention basin. So you just have to make an interpretive call on the gathering space. Is that sufficient to meet the needs for that extra 15 feet of space? With that, I think that identifies most of the issues with the site plan process in our report. The second matter is the parking calculation, and this is, there's a lot of ways the city allows to look at parking calculations, but one of them is when, rather than the mixed use or the shared parking, the one is that you can provide your own study to justify the amount of parking spaces. And the argument in the request is that the government services category has a parking spaces that match the office use amounts. That's the square footage. If you look at office, you look at the parking, you're seeing this office use calculation. And their argument is the fire station is really not an office use. Yeah, they have a small office, but it's really the sleeping quarters, the training rooms, and then a substantial amount of the building is the parking of the fire trucks. And the parking of the fire trucks does not necessitate additional parking demand for the use. So they're requesting that, and they look at various definitions in the code. You have the government services that are all the buildings associated with that. You have operations centers. This is your repair facilities, like the equipment use. These don't generate as many spaces as an office use. Your auditorium type uses. If you looked at strictly just an auditorium use like a church or a reception center, they show the square footage and the generation of that number of parking would be less than the office space. Then they also provide you the data from other stations, particularly the architect is involved in, and the amounts of parking and make the argument that their 18 stalls falls within that same range of the other various stations. So they believe 18 spaces is sufficient to cover their needs based on the information they provided to you. The one thing that we point out is just simply, it says a parking study. You start on a base value with the traffic engineers, but you can take in your type of use and other elements into play in the parking study. The ITE manual has not been consulted with. I did pull up an old one that's not the current one, and it is substantially less for a fire station than an office-type use. But I can't tell you that the new, because you have to be a member and have the permissions to go to their online, but I can't tell you the old ITE manuals that are published. The PM hour is only 0.4 stalls per 1,000 square feet, so you're going to fall way less on the ITE manual. So the issue is do you want to hang your hat on this parking study that says, you know, we need to consult the traffic manual to be comfortable with this, or can we take the data from what they've built at other stations, the type of uses that are occurring, and do it on an occupancy type level rather than just the broad office of the government service. So therefore, staff is supportive of their argument, because I think the base value is going to be low anyway, and I think the comparative of other stations is more reliable to what the parking needs are and their uses. So I don't see the value of chasing the traffic engineer's estimate to justify the parking. So we supported their arguments in their letter. So we're recommending approval with the final site plan and the modification of the parking to 18 stalls, and that's our recommendation to you.
Thank you, Corey. Quick question. So in exchange for giving them the extra 15 feet of space, one of the things that we were looking at the conceptual site plan was to include the colored concrete. Was there anything else that the applicant gave up in exchange for that extra 15 feet of space other than providing this unified gathering area?
I don't think it's a give up. They can address if it's a give up. It's the issue that they don't need a larger building, and they meet the minimum. They meet the minimum width requirements, because if you'll see the tabular data of the civic lot type, they meet all the length and width requirements of the building. So what this would really be saying is we want you to add on 15 feet more of building that they're not even planning on wanting, or provide the gathering space. And what they're saying is we don't need the additional space. We're not giving up that. We're actually just adding an element of the gathering. Are you okay with that, rather than forcing a larger building? If I'm right, the architect can speak for themselves, but that's my assumption.
Yeah, I wasn't involved in that last discussion, so I appreciate the clarification. Any other questions for staff? All right, we'll invite the applicant to step forward and speak to this matter. If you could just state your name into the mic for us.
Yep. Jeff Bassett, I'm the fire chief for South Davis Metro Fire. Just want to thank you for your time, and thank staff for taking their time to work with us. We're trying to move as quickly as possible. We're trying to beat some weather to get this building going. But just to answer your question, Corey's right. We're done with the space of the building, and for us to extend further to the south would force us then to actually do our stormwater underground, which would have even more of a significant cost to us. The only concern that I raised about this gathering place is that it is in the front of the fire station, where emergency vehicles are leaving rapidly, and it's not my favorite. I don't really like having a gathering place. More specifically, in my mind, we get a lot of children that come to the fire station, and having them in that area where vehicles are exiting, lights and sirens, I'm just not real excited about that. I perceive that as a significant safety issue for us, but my understanding is that's the only way that we can do it right now. So we have it in there, but it does raise some concerns for me that having that requirement in front of the fire station. So
why did you switch it from a colored concrete to just a scored decorative patterned concrete?
Just looking at from the design, it was really checkerboarded. If you can come to our other fire stations where we were required to do coloring, and they don't look very good. Just from, if you're looking for appearance, we have scoring and coloring at our other fire stations. They both are challenging. The scoring increases my maintenance because it makes the cement break because our vehicles are heavy, which in turn makes my budget go up, which in turn makes the city's budget go up because I pass those costs through. So the scoring, that's the challenges with the scoring, and the challenges with the coloring is that it fades very quickly. and then it just blends and it looks like normal cement. So that's an increase in our budget to do the coloring. In a couple years, it goes away. So we felt that the scoring would look a lot better. We have a scoring at the main station, and I think it ties in with that if you're looking for that plaza look. But realistically, it's a challenge to see that visually, I think, when you're walking. But
So you opted to go with the scoring option, even though it's going to be more expensive for you in the long run from a maintenance standpoint than the colored concrete?
we reduced our scoring. We're still going with that. There was some, I think, between the discussions we had with staff, there was the other issue with the scoring was it was hard to delineate between what was sidewalk and what was plaza. And there was more, we would like to see straight sidewalks, is what we were being directed to, so we just opted to do the scoring. And since the accessory building wasn't being counted, there was no reason to keep that there, so we put that towards the back.
Okay, thank you. Any
Yeah,
other
thank you.
questions for the applicant? This matter has been scheduled for a public hearing, so we'll take the opportunity to open the public hearing and invite any member of the public who wishes to speak to this matter to step forward. Seeing no one step forward, we'll close the public hearing. Corey, I'll admit, I was not here for the last set of discussion with regard to asking for it to be colored concrete. I certainly haven't looked at other firehouse examples to see whether colored concrete fades or starts to look less over time, but I would love your response to what the applicant has stated with regard to the difference between colored concrete and scoring.
Those are difficult questions because I'm going to run afoul of others within the city that like the colored concrete concepts. So I'll give you what I have experienced here in the city with the use of it, as well as maybe some other professional insight. The corners of Parish and Main have a different color concrete. Do you know what color it is? That was my hopeful response. There isn't sufficient contrast to what was selected there. There is colored concrete at 1250 West and Parish Lane. Do you know what the color is?
No.
Yeah. It's a little better than the corner of Parish. It was supposed to be a rose, more red. It's more pink and something else there. I think the colored concrete is a difficult product to just do colored concrete. Colored concrete is a better framing mechanism. So if you go to Parish Lane and you cross the drive aisles to the Walmart, you know it's there, probably. Not probably so much of the color is the framing that occurs that separates asphalt from the concrete. And that's probably what you notice most. Another place that you see the colored concrete is the pedestrian trail that crosses through Bamberger Station. Has anybody walked that one? There's some good contrast to that and some good scoring marks because you have the representation of the railroads there and the ties that tie that in. And that's better done through the scoring mechanism along with the concrete coloration. If you just did the concrete coloration, it would drift off and not be as distinct. So scoring and textured concrete is often a better, unless you change materials. Once you start changing and interfacing different materials. But the problem with different materials is if you use an asphalt material and a concrete material, you have this change in the temperatures that creates some problems in the materials. The expansion rates of them are different. And so, the framing is more important and the scoring contributes to the framing. And so I do particularly preference, this is art comment as a planner, I do prefer texturing and scoring over the coloration of concrete in the use of some elements, unless you're really changing material types in a heavy design element. And so I prefer that one to to what they're responding to.
And maybe I just misinterpreted the staff report because I looked at it as suggesting that they were switching out something that was better for something that was not as,
and
not as good.
It may be the proposed, because when I'm writing this report, since I wrote the report, I'm also trying to keep in mind as I'm talking about Plaza, the gathering space and the issues associated with the gathering space, and whether that sits as sufficient for the gathering. And if I remember right in the report, I did put a little caveat in where I think the council's going into the future with this, so that if it is the expression of the chief's concern that it's a hazard, a safety hazard, I do think the city council will lean heavily on future amendments because this will be a ladder element to play into. And if I'm sitting in their shoes and I have a council that might change it, I might decide to take the risk and put forth that amendment. My attempt in conversations with them is to not go down that road and just let the design guidelines take care of themselves in the future, because we know we're going to have discussions about them and get them going. And the extension of the apron score patterns, I didn't sense in my mind that adds any component to any different than what's happening inside of the apparatus bay. The issue will be is the lingering. And for me looking at it, and again, it's just me, it's not the chief's point of view, because he's got guys that leave up doors when they try to ride out of the bay and have all kinds of policies of getting people to try before they pry concepts, as they speak in the fire department. Don't knock over the door unless you turn the handle and see if it opens for you. You don't have to blast it with a cannon first to get in. But I do look at it that he's sensitive to that, and the scoring marks creates the elements, but you're still having a pass through traffic. And expansion of that doesn't necessarily increase, in my mind, the gathering area is a problem. I think the issue is that if you do have a kiosk celebrating something historic, there will be occasionally people stopping and reading that. But I also don't believe that raises too much different a risk when it's it's not a seating area happening in front. We don't have seats. We don't have some other areas. You're off to the side of the bay. If something came out, they're starting out in a safe zone, and hopefully don't panic and run across the apparatus bay, which I think you have the same risk if you're a pedestrian and somebody panicking and running across. So I don't see it as an increase of safety, and my doubts are raised that this is a minimal treatment for the gathering. The Park City is the extreme. This is a minimal treatment, and my hopes is that balances both the safety need and the design need, and wouldn't necessarily have to raise amendments in the future.
Yeah, I personally like the idea of the historic monument, and I wouldn't expect, while I'm sure that it's going to be amazing, I can't imagine that people are going to be flocking, all the time to see it. That being said, the one concern I had in reading the staff report was the color. Seems like we talk about beautifying Main Street, and that seems like an excellent opportunity to beautify Main Street. And so I was surprised to hear the chief say that they elected to put in scores, because I assumed that it would be that they were doing it that way because it was less expensive than the colored concrete, and it sounds like it's actually going to cost them more over time than the colored concrete. And if if there are colored concrete along Parrish, I'm going to look the next time I drive down that road. I'm convinced that I think that the score is the better way to go, and I appreciate the fire station for looking at that to create to help beautify Main Street in a way that is not necessarily in their best economic interests. So.
And then the other problem, just real quick, is the batching of the colored concrete, one batch from another, and allotments change through time, and colored can be kind of difficult to work with.
Okay.
We get that sun, so that sun's going to fade the whole front.
Yeah, go ahead and come to the mic for those few folks who are at home. Yeah, we'll invite. Does anyone have any objection if we reopen to allow the applicant? Everyone in favor?
Yeah.
Aye. Okay, go ahead.
Just to go on the maintenance side, that we know from our current station that whole face is going to get sunbaked, and as the sun goes down, it heats up our bays, it heats up the building. And over time, that's also going to have some factor with the coloring as
Okay.
well. So we get just a ton of sunlight on that face. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That satisfies my concern.
Yeah, the sun
it-
really does bleach.
Yeah.
it.
And just a
Fairly
point of
quickly.
information for you all, we are having a groundbreaking ceremony on Saturday at 9 a.m. Just
Excellent.
to just a little kickoff. So
Thank you. All right, any other further discussion or debate?
I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve a parking modification as follows. The parking requirement for the SDMFD Centerville station shall be 18 parking stalls with suggested reasons for action A through C in the staff report.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? All right, we'll start, who did I start with last? Commissioner Hurst.
Aye.
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 I hereby make a motion for the Planning Commission to approve the final site plan for the Centerville Fire Station as follows. Items 1 through 6 in the staff report and suggested reasons for the action A and B.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? If not, we'll start with you, Commissioner Helgeson.
Aye.
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 Okay, it's been passed. Thank you so much.
thank you.
All right, so we had tabled item 4 on our agenda, so we will now return to that matter, which is, we're being asked to consider the proposed final site plan for Legacy Commons PDO, a mixed-use development project on the northwest corner of 1250 West and Parish Lane. So we'll turn the time over to staff.
Thank you, Chair Hayman, members of the commission. Somewhat apologize for 27 pages of report. If you read through all of that, I hope you had a good sleep, because my writing is not exciting. It's very technical. Just to set up, that's generated, but prior to this coming to you, the applicant requested some staff review for compliance so they could feel better about the submittal to you and understand what the matters at hand are. I submitted that a few weeks ago to the applicants, and they responded with resubmittal of new plans addressing a number of items. So then I just used that template and put it into your report and corrected it with their new submittal. So hopefully the applicant's getting a consistent message, what was before and what's now on that review, so that we're communicating appropriately. I'm not going to go through the 27 pages of report review. Again, my style for these lengthy reports is to hit you with the traffic light colors associated with it and to raise awareness of matters in yellow. Things in red would be a concern, and green obviously addressing the issues. I did find later after the report, I brought up the screening on the dumpster issues. I did find the submittal on the dumpster and the screening requirements, and so that's not an issue as raised in the staff report. Just highlight a couple of things just for clarity and understanding. The request before you is a partial final site plan. It's a substantial partial final site plan, but it is not the whole lot that is previously. We haven't recorded the subdivision, but there's 2 lots. There's the hotel lot, and then there's the commercial and the residential use lot. We're talking about tonight the residential and commercial use lot, and they'd like to phase that. And the phasing plan shows you the hotel is separate. The commercial area, they would seed over some and take care of and maintain the commercial area till they can get it marketed for site plan development approval, but they would like and seek the substantial amount of the property in the residential units that are slated there. Just for clarity, I know the applicant knows this, but the commission may not fully remember when the city council approved this project, the residential development could not receive building permits until a hotel has been approved as a site plan and a building permit is issued and a footing has been poured. So you're seeing this before you see the hotel. My understanding in talking with the applicant in a few meetings is that between the subdivision, the hotel, and the project, there's a lot going on. And they're trying to align all of those into some common area of management. And so you'll likely see the hotel at some point in time, even though you're approving the residential now. They'd like to enable that opportunity to exist as they finish out the subdivision and handle the transfer of property for the hotel. So that's why you're seeing the residential probably a little bit earlier than maybe you recall. Substantially, it complies with the expected PDO approval for the most part. I think there's one area of building that staff raises and takes a debated issue on the architecture. The other one, just for your information, is that there was anticipated early on through the city engineer that the main entrance to the residential, which is the intersection of 500 North, would be a roundabout area in the future. So the plans were originally crafted accommodating that roundabout, and you see that in the submittal. It has since changed. The city, in studying the connection to Farmington with the 650 West, which runs into the new high school, we had a large area study for the CDA. We asked the traffic engineer to take a look at it, and they actually recommended against the roundabout. It's not that the roundabout couldn't be done, but the future is a double left on Parrish going, so you're coming south, you would do a double left to get onto, not on Parrish, you're coming down 1250 West south, double left to get on Parrish going east. If you don't have that double left installed, then you'd back traffic up in the future through the roundabout. So right now there's not a plan for the double left. It would be a state project to put in a double left. And so the recommendation came back and said, you know, you're probably better, you have a large right-of-way. This is an 80-foot right-of-way. You would be better off expanding the lane structure in that 1250 West than constructing a roundabout. Then you don't have to rely on the double left in the future. If it comes, it does. If it doesn't, then you're okay. And so there was discussion as of very late to correct the plans to do the expansion of the lane expansions. It won't take additional property per se because we have sufficient right-of-way, but it would shift the improvements. And so shifting the improvements like the park strip, the pedestrian path, those will be shifted on 1250 West. On the east side, they'll be shifted further to the west, and the pedestrian pathway will now be on the property line or inside the property line, still preserving what you see in a layout with a park strip and pathway. Or we lose the pathway. So they've agreed that they'll just simply do the, if I remember right, Spencer can address this, they will just simply do the lane shift and replace everything that they would put in along the property line. The pedestrian path would land just inside the property line. They would provide a pedestrian easement for that path, and we would maintain the improvements as you're seeing. It would just now be wider lane striping going on in 1250 West. I've received those corrected plans last Thursday. So I call out that they should correct those plans. We received them and forwarded them to Kevin, and so they're probably complying with that debate about shifting improvements already. So I just wanted to bring that up, that's the direction the city engineer and their engineer and designers have resubmitted to the city. We need everybody to look in it and make sure it's shifted correctly. So that would be a change from what you're seeing, not from a design standpoint. You'd see the same, it would just be at a different location slightly. The issue of the architecture is the main one I think I bring up into it. In the conversations behind scenes, they make the argument that they think this is an improved architecture from the original. I didn't take the position whether it's improved or not improved. I tried to describe that the PDO ordinance, in our parish lane design guidelines, we look at compatibility with surrounding development. And in the past PDOs, we've looked at either specific colors that are compatible in an interpretive value, and they have a tendency to be on some colors, some warm colors, and some other things associated with that have a warmer feel to it. Or the Shorelands Commerce Park. So we've used, the Shorelands Commerce Park's a different zone than this. Remember, the PDO is a custom zone. And so the concept is that we'll reach up to the Shorelands Commerce Park and use that palette of colors since we're along the Legacy interchange. And so you can propose a set of colors that you would like, and if we deem them okay, which they did with the Denver Astor, what's it called, project, I put exhibit to you, or the Shorelands Commerce Park. And it is my position that whether the quality of the materials are good or bad is not the debate. The debate is that the PDO had an expectation, and I'm not sure that I interpret that their new proposed design meets the original PDO expectation. Why that's important from my vantage point is we had that issue with Maverick. There was a certain expectation of design. Maverick did not want to do necessarily that design. Maverick was then required to go back in and change the PDO to add that additional color palette to it. And so I don't think it's fair that if I think from an interpretive value, again, it's my interpretation, that if this isn't compliant with the PDO exhibit, for me to just simply compartmentalize because it's a better set of materials would be unfair to the practices of the past. So I've taken the position, it's a fairly hardline position, to recommend tabling to readdress that or to have it amended. But I think the applicant wants time to debate with you whether that interpretation of the PDO is correct. And so from there, if you solve the architecture from staff's standpoint, we've provided a motion for you that includes a list of conditions of approval to move forward with the site plan if you choose to disagree with staff's position. And then I'll leave that for you to ask questions or talk to the applicant.
Thank you, Corey. Any questions for the staff? If not, we'll invite the applicant to step forward and speak to this matter. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Spencer Wright, Wright Development Group, 1178 West, Legacy Crossing Boulevard, Suite 100 in Centerville. I apologize that I was not here earlier when you took up this matter, but I appreciate you being willing to take it up now. Let's see, we are excited to be here. It's been a long process on this project, and we're glad to be in front of you again. As Corey mentioned, we've worked with the city engineer at length to get this project designed, and from the very beginning he insisted that there needed to be a roundabout on 1250 West, and we frankly disagreed with that, but we spent probably 6 to 9 months designing that roundabout, probably tens of thousands of dollars designing that roundabout as well. We met with the mayor and the city manager and explained to them why we thought that was counterproductive from what the city was trying to accomplish, and that is to move traffic on 1250 West. But we did learn a couple months ago that Kevin, the city engineer, had decided that he did not want to do the roundabout, and so we've redesigned the plans to take that out, and that's what we have today. With regards to the colors, as Corey mentioned, we feel like we have made an improvement on what was originally presented at the PDO. If the decision of the Planning Commission is, no, we want you to do exactly what you presented at the PDO, we don't have a problem with that. We weren't trying to cut any corners. We were really just trying to create a better product. What was presented at the PDO was a project that was done in Colorado by the architect that we've hired, and we asked him to try to make it better. And we think it's a better product, but again, if the commission disagrees and you say, no, just match it, do exactly what you presented, we don't have a problem with that. Again, we're just trying to create the best product that we can. It's more expensive. If you don't like the colors, if you want something in a different color, we're happy to do it whatever color you want, but that's what we thought was best, and obviously it's subjective. Everyone has a different opinion on what they think looks good. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions that you have.
First question, did you go back and tell the city engineer I told you so?
We did not.
No, he did not go back.
I'm just kidding. We love our city engineer. It's unfortunate that the roundabout didn't end up happening in the way that they expected, although I'm really stunned that they said a double left-hand turn. They really expect that much traffic along that road?
Again, you're looking at 2040 numbers. I think that's part of the discussion with the applicant is what they're responsible for. But they anticipated that if you did not provide a double left at Parrish in the future, then the traffic would back up through the roundabout. And so to solve that was a capacity through lane changing to increase the capacity that way.
That just surprised me. Editorial comment purely. Okay, let's take the design palette off of the table for just a second, because there are a number of other things that staff addressed in their report. Do you want to speak to any of the other things that staff is saying in the report that need to happen with regard to this project?
I believe we've met all of those requirements. I think our engineer submitted plans back in Wednesday of last week, and I think we've met all of those requirements, and I could be wrong, but I think that's really the main issue here.
Will you remind me, because I don't think I saw it in the staff report, what the original colors were that were submitted, and what have you switched, the white and the silver?
I can show you the two exhibits. So if you have your electronic copy, this is, the building shapes and so forth for the most part are present. I don't think that's the issue, but here's the PDO calls out this exhibit. So that's what you're using, this exhibit in your interpretation of compliance. And then the Shorelands Commerce Park palette. But here is their materials and color. Maybe it'll come up. There we go. This is their materials and color exhibit associated with it. And so you have a bronze, you have a light brick veneer toasted gray, a James Hardy that's a silver, James Hardy that's snowbound, and then a fiber cement panel, James Hardy Black Fox. And I think from our standpoint, the silvers and this I'm not an architect, and so this is really bad for a planner to try to describe something, but the residential of the Denver, it was called a prairie style roof. It had some of the warmer colors associated with it. I'm not contesting the quality of these materials, but the silvers and some other elements associated don't have a Shorelands Commerce Park palette. They don't belong in the Shorelands Commerce palette. And so now you have to rely on the Denver Aster exhibit to determine if these materials comply with that. And you do have some light materials in the Denver, but you also have the more warmer colors and the tans and the other elements associated with it. So I take it from a layperson's design, it's not contesting the quality of their design. I think the quality of their design is fine. I do think it has a more modern appeal to it. It's a more contemporary design, which can be argued to be a better quality project. But it has a very modern, contemporary look, and when I see it in the setting of residential legacy Shorelands Commerce Park, I don't see the modern, contemporary look compatible with that. What's been built, as well as the Shorelands Commerce Park, and that's the only issue that I'm trying to address.
And remind me, what are the colors of the Shoreland Park? I'm drawing.
Think of nature, the warm colors. I can look those up so you could see them.
Okay.
Take just a minute to get to them.
And I understand from your comments, you're willing to do whatever we want in terms of color palette. So am I taking that comment accurately?
Yeah.
Let's see, where are we at? We need to get government.
While Corey is looking for that, does anyone else have any questions for the applicant? Yeah, it seems to me like this color issue is the sticky wicket. Yeah. I was just grateful that you didn't put that yellow color on it that's across the way. I'm sorry, I will go down in history as the one person on this planning commission that absolutely hates that yellow color. I just hate it.
Yeah. So the Shorelands Commerce, here's your primary colors, and then here's your secondary accent colors. So you do have some cool hues in the blues associated with it. That's the sky of the Shorelands Commerce Park. But you also have a lot of the warm hues of the colors of nature, the greens, the tans. And then you can do some accent colors where you get the little brighter colors that come from the barns and sheds that you see out in the Shorelands Commerce Park. So I don't think the palette really is compatible with the Shorelands Commerce Park. The palette is then you're relying on the Denver, and is the Denver, there's some arguments in there. I don't want to say there's not some arguments in there, but I also include the Parish Lane Design Guidelines are applying here, and the Parish Lane Design Guidelines say harmonious and compatible with surrounding development. And I look at the design of the materials, and although they may be quality and maybe even in vogue, for lack of better terms, in a modernistic look, I don't think it relates to the other residential development, is what I'm saying. But again, you're asking a planner, which is not the best person to ask.
Corey, can you just talk a little bit about did you call it desert prairie? Were you referencing an architectural style, or is that still the color palette?
And this is where I think in past conversations with me is it's the way the roof treatment occurs. The prairie style, and I think it depends on, you see the overhangs with the woodwork, so they're flat, but they got the timber construction. That's a contemporary version of Frank Lloyd Wright's prairie style home.
Okay.
And if you go to the architecture that they're proposing, that's missing. But again, I don't want anybody to say I'm insulting the quality of design. I'm not trying to insult the quality of design.
Yeah, and if it's okay, is it okay for me to say something else?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, and just to Corey's point, we made a conscious decision to do this. We looked at the other multifamily projects that are at this intersection, and we said we would like to do something that's a little bit different, that's going to stand out a little bit, that's going to look a little bit better, and it's going to age better. So to Corey's point, we made a conscious decision to try to do it. If the commission, the city says, no, we don't want that, we want it to look similar to what we've already got there, we can do that. We can do what we originally proposed. That's fine. We just thought we would try to improve upon it. So.
Does anyone have any other questions for the applicant? No. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And to take care of a housekeeping matter, this has been scheduled for a public hearing, so we'll invite any member of the public who wishes to speak to step forward. Seeing no one here to step forward, we'll close the public hearing. Further discussion, debate.
So from the palette that you just had up there a second ago, I think that was the Shorelands palette, right? Comparing that, and again, I think I've made this comment before, but colors are not my thing. I tell my wife all the time, I live in an 8-color world, so blue, red, whatever. But from looking at that and comparing that to the submittal, I mean, the only one that really doesn't match is that brown, right? I mean, because the other ones on the Shorelands one are a lighter, warmer brown. That's a browner brown. I don't know how to describe that, but because the other ones, I think you could squint and say that those other colors exist in that palette. Is that not it?
Sometimes they're a little cool. I'm not a color expert either.
I mean, the Shorelands talks about the use of wood and rock, so I didn't take issue with the wood-grained product. It's really the silver and the brick veneer wash that I think is missing.
I think it looks really nice. I just do wonder if we've maybe just, for cohesive and future development, if we've wandered a little too far away from the Shorelands design and color palette requirements. I suspect he's right that, I think that's a really trendy look that people it will resonate and they'll like it, but I think it's just a little too far away from our requirements for that area, and I think in the end it may not look like it has that nice cohesive feel that's why we have those design guidelines in the first place.
I think that it's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. I really, really like it. But the applicant says that they intentionally changed it so that it would stand out. So the question is, do we want it to stand out, or do we want it to be cohesive? And I think, at least I come down, as gorgeous as this is, I think I come down on the side of cohesion.
I think I agree with you a little bit on that one, because thinking back to previous discussions on Parish Lane, talking about whether something had a significant visual presence from Parish Lane, and I imagine that even though these are going to be kind of tucked back off of Parish Lane, they're still going to have a significant visual presence, based on some, I guess you could say, precedent that this planning commission set. It almost feels like I feel like it's almost applying the same standard, right? Mm-hmm. Significant visual presence, so it needs to kind of follow the same expectations,
I could see it in a lot of places where it would be very, very cool.
Yeah.
But for me, not here.
Well, and frankly, I really do love some of the things they did that I do think meet the guidelines, like the wood site. I don't know what that is, but that material, I think it looks fantastic. I just think, and I don't know if there's architects are obviously going to know what goes with that look, but I think just the roof line's a little off, and everything else, I think you could just maybe adjust the paint colors slightly and it would meet the standard, but I am a little concerned that the roof line maybe is just not quite right. So I don't know if that then impacts everything else.
Yeah.
See, I'm falling on the other side of this. Other than I don't know the requirements, but I don't like to see a cookie cutter. I like a variety, and I think that looks pretty. I think it adds to Centerville. So if it's something that is appealing to a different buyer versus the cookie cutter that I mean, not that it's cookie cutter, but I don't know. I think it looks very nice, and I don't think they all have to look the same to have a nice product in our city.
Well, that's where I'm saying, like, I really love a lot of the architectural features of this. And I think it is more what's trending and popular right now, but 20 years from now, it'll all look slightly outdated, and then are we wishing it was still a little more cohesive?
But, I mean, I like driving around a neighborhood that I know what house I live in instead of they all look the same.
It looks the same as everyone else's.
And I've become very familiar with, I mean, Salt Lake City has so many different apartments going in, and they're all so different, but there is a trend for some of these colors, and I think it's going to be a really old trend at some point. So I just like the difference personally. If we have to have it because it's required to fall into a certain color thing, then I understand that, but I do like the variety personally.
If we were talking about a residential development, I would be completely on board with that, but we're talking about a commercial development to which this residential is adjacent, and there's a reason that our Parish Lane looks really, in my opinion, really pretty, and it's because it's all cohesive along that street. And so, in my mind, that's what we want to try to keep on this side. So that's what, I mean, I respect that people would want different colors, but that's where I come down.
I was going to say, can I ask Kathy a question? When you talk about that you like it because it's different, can we look back at the first version for their PDO? I mean, to me, that looks different too than what's already down there. I admit I like the windows and everything way better on the other.
Yeah.
But this one has the red, and I don't know if it's just the way the lighting hits it, but it almost looks yellow. And if you look at some of the other apartments down there, they've got a red and yellow.
Okay, so you're saying maybe the colors are quite similar.
This is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
honestly, I think if they slightly tweaked those colors.
Well, can you put back up the shorelines? Because they don't have to stick. I mean, if the goal, respectfully, if the goal is for that building to stand out, I think that there is a way for them to make that happen using the shoreline colors in a way that's still cohesive with the shoreline palette.
I think so too. I think they
Yeah.
could slightly tweak those colors and they would be right in line with the cohesion. My only question there is the roof line, like when you change that roof line, does that then cause issues with the rest of it?
See, the
Which
roof line
probably
doesn't.
only an architect. Yeah, are you guys okay with the roof line?
It totally does not bother me the way that it is now. It's
Okay.
from my layman's perspective, the only thing I'm concerned about is the color. I don't care about the roof line. I don't
Okay.
care whether it's overhang or not overhang. But
And
that's
I
just
probably
me.
can be persuaded one way or the other. I think it looks really nice. I think it should color-wise at least match if we're gonna let the roof line slide.
So Corey, can I ask you a question then, going back to this, staff recommends tabling the matter, or there's this motion in here, remind me what this motion is for? That's to stick with the
Yeah,
previously
it
submitted?
would just assume that that you're okay with their proposed colors.
Their
If you want to
new-
add a condition in to change that in agreement, you decide, but right now, the motion that's prepared to approve assumes that the exhibits that you see here are the ones that they're building.
Okay. That clarifies that.
Uh-oh, so
Yeah,
the
I'm inclined.
applicant might want to weigh in.
Uh-oh, are you raising your hand? Yes, I move that we reopened well, I guess we don't even have to do that. Let's just invite the applicant to step
Okay,
forward.
Thank you. Yeah, we would respectfully request that if you would like us to change the colors, that you approve the site plan subject to coming up with colors that are okay with staff, unless, of course, you want to see it again. But we would be happy to work with staff to change the colors so that Corey and staff are okay with the change. If you want us to come back, we will, but
As much
that's a
as,
suggestion.
as much as I trust our staff, I'm really picky about colors, if you can't tell. So I would prefer for this one to come back. I'm
Hint.
just being totally honest.
Give you a hint, leave the yellow
Well,
out.
I mean, I don't know if this is issue, because I recognize the applicant's been through a long process, and certainly the issue of tabling would just add synergy to the frustration. Lisa can weigh in on this. If the commission is looking at a color selection, I would hate to see tabling solely just based on the color. So I think the issue would be is you could move forward with the final site plan with the caveat that the applicant bring back the color selection, because they've got to move forward. The building permit's got to be issued. There's a lot between the hotel and all of this to occur. I think in the long run, and Spencer, correct me if I'm wrong, if this is approved, you can move forward with the vesting issue, knowing the caveat as the colors come back for approval. That way you can move on with the other aspects that you want to get done, and wouldn't put you out to come at least show the colors at another meeting.
Okay. Well, then, unless
Of course.
there's any further, Lisa?
I don't love that, just because if
I
you've
know.
already proved it and then you say, oh, yeah, we do want to change the architecture, or you don't like the colors, I don't know, but I also think that you need to just leave the colors to the applicant. I mean, it's not up to the planning commission to pick a color, it's just up to you to say this meets it or doesn't. So I'm glad you're saying, leave it up to the applicant, because we're not in the business.
Could it be then they just tie it to the Shorelands Commerce Park
No,
palette?
I mean, that's fine. I'm just giving you my caution if you just want to bring that back. But if you are going to approve it, I do have some changes to the conditions that I would like to suggest. Shall I give you those?
Well, no, wait a second. Let's talk about the color issue for a second. If we just tied it to the Shorelands colors, I guess technically we wouldn't need to see the colors again. We could leave that up to their discretion as long as it satisfied the shoreline colors.
Can't staff just verify that it does satisfy?
I think so.
Seems
Yeah,
like it's
that's probably true.
Seems like it's pretty obvious that there has been a color palette defined,
Right.
so.
Okay. Sorry, Lisa. What are your changes to this motion?
So, on condition number 3, I want it to clearly state that the entire site plan is subject to all the terms and conditions of ordinance 2017-29. This condition is only limited to section 2E. So I think we could change that by just simply saying the final site plan approval shall be subject to ordinance 2017-29, comma, including section 2E that talks about this.
Okay.
Because there are some issues with phasing that we may debate at a staff level, and it's important to clarify that they're still subject to all the PDO requirements. Second, on the phasing, the PDO makes it very clear that all the public infrastructure must go in with phase 1. This is addressed in condition number 4. So we could either add something at the end that, you know, well, let's see, subject to the project required infrastructure to support development through, maybe at the end of that first sentence say, and in compliance with ordinance 2017-29. That'll satisfy my concern, which again is that the PDO ordinance restricts the phasing options and also says that all public improvements will go in with phase 1.
That's at the end of the first sentence?
On 4?
Through handling and previous subdivision approval. Well, I read city ordinance as meaning our zoning code.
Right.
So anyway, I would still say, and in compliance with ordinance 2017-29. Adding a condition number 12, and we've kind of talked about this. I know I've talked with the applicant's attorney, but I thought we compromised that the access road to the hotel pad has to go in phase 1. So I would suggest adding a condition 12 that says developers shall include improvements for the access to phase 1 in the phase 1 phasing. And again, this should be handled by the subdivision, but just in case they move forward with site plan before they record the plat, I'd like that clarification. Number 13, they do have to submit protective covenants in accordance with CZC 12.41.110 prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. And number 14, that the developers shall sign an improvement agreement, post the bond, and pay all fees prior to a building permit. And I would have mentioned those earlier, but I thought it'd be tabled, so.
Do we need to add a 15?
And then the 15, that
Yeah.
that the
Oh,
color.
yes, and then
that
you
the
can
color
add
palette will comply with the shorelands.
How about
Color
applicant shall revise the coloring scheme to comply with the Shorelands Commerce Park color palette to be confirmed by staff?
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't give you the roof line.
That's okay.
That's okay.
Watch this thing come back and they'll like choose all of the yellow colors just because I said that I don't like the yellow colors, but none of the ones on the shoreland were the color that I particularly dislike, but I'm hoping that they go more towards the cool colors, just given.
Remember, we like it.
But it's please
us over the.
Tell your architect that we really did appreciate the drawing. I mean, it's definitely a nice looking building.
It looks really nice.
Yeah, really nice.
I would buy that one over the other.
Yeah. All right, any further discussion or debate? All right, does anyone want, well, you know what, I will move, hold on. I will make a motion for the Planning Commission to grant final site approval for the Legacy Commons development with conditions 1 through 11 as numbers 3 and 4 were amended by Lisa, adding conditions 12, 13, 14, and 15 that Lisa also articulated better than I could with regard to access to the hotel pad, the covenants, the bond, and the color palette.
And the findings.
And findings.
Thank you for suggested reasons 1 through, or A through F.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion or debate? All right, Commissioner Hurst.
Aye.
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 All right, thank you very much. All right. And the next item on the agenda is the Community Development Director's report. So we will turn the time over to staff.
So we currently have no agenda items for the next meeting, but we have already scheduled that meeting and discussion with the residents and homeowners surrounding the Main Street area, which we'll be sending flyers to this week. So I spoke with Shaylin about this already, and Bruce Cox of the Parks Department, and the Trails Committee is available to meet as a work session at 7 o'clock in place of our meeting. So if you guys want to do that, does that sound okay? Yes. Great.
And then go ahead.
Oh,
Lisa.
sorry, just a reminder, I will miss that meeting. I'll be out, so
Okay.
I can't give any
It'll
training,
just be a
even
work
if you wanted to
session
assign
now.
it to me.
No, I think we've got our training covered for this year.
Okay. And then just to add into your information at the council, they adopted the amendments that involve the fire station. At their last meeting, they received a request from JF Capital. JF Capital Company is the one that owns the 2 lots south of the Megaplex Theater and the large office building on the west side here by the Megaplex. They've been working diligently in their mind to try to figure out how to market the 2 lots south. They have entered into discussions with a few property owners, particularly Mark Green and Cyro Steel, for potential what the status of their properties and uses are. There's been some open dialogue. So they came to the last meeting of the city council and requested an opportunity to just explain where they're at, because to move forward, they have multiple visions of the property, for lack of better terms. And as they strategically decide and potentially invest into the west area, they are very aware that we had a vision and it didn't come to fruition. So the issue is this is going to come back up on the table again, and we've explained to them that's been a goal. So they wanted to have some interaction with the city. They appeared before the city council requesting that the city council was a little hesitant because they don't want to be locked into a certain decision or expectation. I spent a little bit of time, indicating that this isn't a rezone request, this isn't a specific development project, this is back visioning. If they're going to acquire into the property, they want to understand a vision. We've had goals to re-up the west plan again. We know that Hogan has got the Masco site up and operating over there, so we're absent of that property potentially. But still, it kind of generated an opportunity for vision. The council received, or at least accepted the invitation to have a work-style meeting to understand what they're thinking, and maybe, without committing to things, giving them some information. And then we talked about inviting the Planning Commission, and their ultimate position was to take is we'd like to receive the information, because they wanted to do it about October. I did raise the issue that you're involved in this Main Street uses, so there's not a regular commission night to have a meeting with them, but I kind of wanted to see if there was a joint ability for you to kind of get together and think about a common vision, and you could hear the same information. They were a little uncomfortable with that. Their statement was, at least to this extent, if they say a lot, then you may not say enough. If you say too much, then they might not say enough. And they wanted the ability for each body to have an opportunity to share what you really think. And so they requested the applicant have 2 meetings. And so anticipate around October sometime, potentially that work session with them, yet to be scheduled with the Planning Commission, because you're busy with your nights with the Main Street uses. So it may be, later at the end of the year or after the first of the year, but I just wanted you to be aware of that. That's all I have to report, I think.
Great. Also, I would point out on our agenda, there's a reference to the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce Housing Gap Coalition for October 16th. As I understand it, there is a representative of that committee, I guess is what it's called, that's going to come, as I understand it, and be presenting to the city council.
Yes, that's correct.
With regard to the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce. This is something that goes back to the affordable housing issue, and it's something that the businesses that make up the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce are looking at for a prospective issue to make sure that we can still continue to keep Utah vibrant and growing and have housing for folks. So I would encourage everybody, even though I know it's not being made for us, I would really invite any of us as commissioners, if
Yes,
you have
please
the
attend.
ability to attend, please come do so. I think that it's going to be super informative. Okay, and the only other item that we have on our agenda is the minutes review and acceptance for the August 22nd meeting, and there was a slight hiccup in those not getting attached to the PDF, and it sounds like a couple of us didn't get the opportunity to review those, so I'm going to propose that we table the review and acceptance of those minutes until our next meeting, and since we've got a fairly light schedule, I don't feel particularly guilty about doing that. Anyone have any concerns?
Would it be our next meeting or the meeting after that? We can have
The next meeting.
We're gonna have a regular meeting?
Yeah, because we're meeting with the Trails Committee.
Oh.
So just make sure to notice it as a regular meeting, not a work
Yeah, we're
session.
planning more of that, a
That's
work session
It's a work
format
session.
still.
That's
Oh.
right. We can put off the minutes until the.
We can put off the minutes
next.
until the next one.
Yeah.
Does that cause you any significant heartburn, Lisa?
We try to approve them at the next meeting.
What would be
Well, but if we
the-
have a work session in 2 weeks, and then the next meeting is next month, is that?
Well, hold on. What is the practical implications of calling it a regular meeting next go around instead of just a work session?
The recording issues.
Oh, recording issues.
To be, I mean.
Well, they're the same. I mean,
We just have to set up, well, I guess they are the same. 'Cause it's not an open house, it's a work session.
yeah, you could still sit around the table, but either way, you have to have a recording and
I mean,
minutes.
It just has to be recorded
Can
audio.
they approve minutes at a work session?
No.
It's just a public noticing issue, right? You have
Yeah,
to
that's right.
notice it as a meeting.
Well, both you have to notice. You have to
So we could
notice-
have a short meeting to approve the minutes?
Oh, I see what you're saying, Katie. You could have a work session and a short, regular meeting.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and then you have 2 sets of minutes, so that's
Even more annoying.
I'm willing to be
You
annoying,
can
just
do what
because.
you want. Then I think out of all those, then you could just go to the next regular meeting if you wanted. It just wouldn't meet our policy, which we try to do the next, but it's still within a month, so. It's just if an applicant has to be waiting for those minutes, but
Oh,
let me
that's
look at them.
true.
These actually
Okay,
was
they're really
just-
short minutes.
I'm
You know
no,
what?
I'm no,
I am- I'm
I'm
gonna
no Shaylin
propose-
Heyman, but I didn't see anything that needed to be.
No, actually,
Okay.
there were no,
Wait,
there were
wait.
no applicant, this was just training, so they're not,
It's-
nobody's looking for them.
Oh, see, now Lisa just made my decision for me. So I'm still gonna just push these back. We're gonna table them until the next
Regular
meeting.
meeting.
Till
Yep.
the next regular meeting.
Okay.
Till the next
regular in
regularly scheduled
It'll be
meeting in October.
October.
All right. Thank you to everyone. I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.